Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Fernando and I'm here with DoorLoop. I'm one of the bookkeepers on staff. I'm happy to have you guys and welcome to our webinar. We're going to be going over a couple of things today, your chart of accounts, your tenant transactions, and just kind of showing you through the flow of almost start to finish of what you would be typically doing on a monthly basis, as far as creating your categorizations, creating those accounts for your reports, recording your tenant transactions, handling any management fees or any revenue to you as the property managers, as well as handling any owner distributions at the end of the month. Now, I will say if you would like, since this is live, you guys can go ahead and input any questions that you might have throughout the call or throughout this webinar, and we will go ahead and go over them towards the end. So, let's begin. If we're looking at DoorLoop right now, you'll notice that we're looking at the overview screen, and the first thing that we would typically want to do before inputting any transactions is making sure that all the accounts that we have saved in DoorLoop are for what you would need to categorize everything. So by that, I mean we're going to create our chart of accounts. If we click the accounting on the left-hand portion, and then you go to chart of accounts right over here, you'll notice that there's quite a few accounts here that we can choose from. These are the default ones that DoorLoop does offer, in the fact that you would want to use those just from the gate. Now, we do know that all operations are different. All states do categorize things a little bit differently. So if you wanted to create any chart of accounts, whether for revenue, any liabilities, so on and so forth, you would go ahead and click where it says create new account in the upper right. Here you would be able to categorize what type of account we're looking at. Again, whether a fixed asset, liability, some type of expense, and then the name that you would be able to label that under. So any reports that you run in the future and any transactions you associate with this chart of account, you would then see them within those reports. We can then move over to the tenant transactions. So if we go to one of our leases on the left-hand side, active leases, and we can use our auto pay and advanced tenant over here, you'll notice that we have the Transactions tab. Here's where you'll record all the tenant activity as far as what's been being paid, what's being charged to the tenant. If there's any deposits that are being withheld at one point in time, here's where you would see that history. So, as an example, you'll see that we have a running balance of $11,500. If you wanted to go ahead and receive a payment for this, we would click where it says Receive Payment up at the top. We would date the payment accordingly, typically matching whatever you would see in your bank statement, as this is a manual entry that we're recording. Here we would put the amount. We would choose the payment method, and I would strongly suggest you trying to match as close as possible to what exactly occurred outside of the software. So if there was a Zelle payment, some type of Venmo, any kind of wire, you would go ahead and choose either EFT or other. That would typically be the best option. So you'll notice that there's three different options at the bottom. There's the automatically apply payments option, which this will apply to automatically, quote unquote, to any charges that you have available on the lease ledger. Notice how we have quite a few rent charges open. Having this enabled would make it so that this $11,500 payment we're about to record automatically would apply to these charges down here. Alternatively, if you were to disable it just like as we did now, you'd be able to categorize them as needed down below. For now, for the sake of the example, we'll leave it on. The automatically deposit button. So let's say, for example, this $11,500, you received it as a check. So you are paid, but we haven't taken it to the bank or deposited into our funds. This button right here would allow it so that we could record the payment as paid, but it will not add it to our bank balance or ready available cash up until we actually deposit these funds into our bank account. As an example, we'll leave it off for now so that you can see the final result when we get back to the main screen here. And then lastly, the email payment receipt to the tenant. Very straightforward. If we want to record this payment of $11,500 and then also let the tenant know that we received this payment, you would just leave that enabled. So let's go ahead and hit save. You'll notice that the balance here would immediately update. But on the other hand, we're showing the undeposited funds here. So again, this was because, and just to open up the receive payment tab one more time, we went ahead and left this automatically deposit funds tab or toggle disabled. Alternatively, as an example, let's say we record an additional $1,000 payment. We will leave all of these on. We'll just choose our payment method one more time, and then we'll hit save. You're going to notice two distinctions. One, obviously that the credit and the running balance has gone up. Two, the payment that we recorded for $11,500 is showing as undeposited, while the payment of $1,000 is showing as deposited. All right. So now that we've gone over your chart of accounts and tenant transactions, we're going to move on to the business side of things. So we can start recording the bills and expenses that go against these properties and make sure that we're recording everything that is required to ensure that, for one, our available balances are correct, and two, your reporting is showing the activity that actually occurred outside of the software. So in this example, we're going to create a bill for one of our properties for Home Depot of $500. So let's say we wanted to go ahead and record this. We'll click Create New in the upper left-hand corner, and then you're going to click on where it says Create Bill. Once in this menu, you'll notice that there's a vendor option. We can go ahead and specify the vendor in this particular case, which would be Home Depot. You have the option of making it a one-time bill or a recurring bill. So if this is something that's going to keep occurring on a monthly basis, maybe even quarterly, every 2 weeks, whatever the time period might be, you have the ability to go ahead and do so with a start date and an end date. Alternatively, if it's forever, then we can run this until the end of time. Now, for the sake of the example, we will be making it a one-time bill. We're going to go ahead and choose one of our properties here. And then in the category, we're going to choose our expense property. In this particular case, we're going to categorize it as repairs. And let's call it $500. So now we've created the bill. At this point, we still would need to record the payment because right now it just shows that we've been invoiced, but we would still need to take care of these funds. So let's say you want to record the bill payment. If you were to click again, Create New in the upper left-hand corner, and then click on where it says Pay Bills. In here, you're going to see a couple of options, and we can specify whether the vendor, the property, or all bills or some bills if you just want to pay a few. In this case, we're only going to filter for the Biscayne property, and we're going to click Next. In here, you'll notice that we have the balance due of $500, and then there's an option on the far right where you're actually able to edit these amounts. So let's say if you decided to pay only a portion of this $500, we would be able to manually edit the amount on this side, and then you can go ahead and click Save. On the next page, we're going to click Next. You'll see that the payment amount of $250 is there. We'll be able to choose our payment method in question if this was handled outside of the software. Again, we try to always suggest that you mimic exactly what happened outside of DoorLoop in DoorLoop. So if this was Zelled, you wrote a check, cash, whatever the case may be, you want to make sure that we try to mimic that as close as possible. In this case, we'll call it that it was wired, so we'll use the EFT option, and it was paid as of today. And then we can click Finish. All right. So now we're back to the overview page, and we've successfully created the bill and bill payment as you just saw in the last step. Now we do have another option to record things as expenses. Now, to be fair, the result would be the same. A bill and a bill payment and an expense would both be reducing the account balance as well as the property balance. So it shows that the X amount of funds were paid. Now, with a bill and a bill payment, requires 2 steps. You create the invoice or you create the bill, and then you would follow it with the payment. Alternatively, with expenses in this case, it's one and done, as I like to call it. So to show you how to go ahead and create this, you would click Create New in the upper left-hand corner one more time. And on the far bottom right, you're going to notice that there's an expense option right over here. If we go ahead and click that, it'll look somewhat similar to the bill screen that we saw previously. In this particular case, we'll be able to choose the payee, or the recipient of the funds, whether it might be a vendor, an owner, or some kind of tenant, depending on the expense that we're creating here. We'll use Home Depot again as the same example. And as you noticed in the bill earlier, this also has a recurring option. So if this is an expense that's happening on a month-to-month basis for the same amount, you can go ahead and record it as a recurring expense so that your cash available is showing these funds being deducted on a recurring basis. Again, for the sake of the example, we'll keep it as a one-time expense. We'll leave it dated for today and then fill out the following. So the pay from account would be the account that these funds were paid from. We'll call it our Chase account. The property, we'll choose our Biscayne property. And then the category would remain the same. It would fall under one of our expenses. In this particular case, let's call it Repairs Electrical. We'll record it for $500. And then we'll choose our payment method, again, mimicking exactly what would happen outside of the software. And then here, once this is all filled out, everything looks okay, we can go ahead and hit Save. Great. So now, if we were to quickly look at your reports and we were to run a cash flow statement or an owner statement for this particular property, and we were to filter it for this property, this is where the importance of those chart of accounts come in, when mentioned a little earlier. Notice here, you're going to see that there's $500 for garage rent, while there's $1,500 in rent. And then here are those unapplied lease payments that I was mentioning. And these show this way because there are no charges on the lease ledger at this moment for those $2,000 to be applied towards. However, it's still received as income, so you do want to record it as such within your reports. So now, with everything said and done, you do have the undeposited amount at the bottom. We should have a cash available of $2,000. So from here, we can move on to the next steps of recording our business expenses for the month, any repairs that we might have to take care of, as well as our management fees, as we want to ensure that you as the property manager are getting your piece for maintaining and handling these properties on a monthly basis. So let's get started. With this, we're going to set up our management fees first for this specific property. To do so, we're going to click on Rentals on the left-hand side, and we're going to go to Properties. Here, we're going to click on the 1000 Biscayne Boulevard, which is the one that we are working with, and we're going to click Settings on the far right over here. Once you're in the property settings here, you're going to click on where it says Management Fees at the bottom. Considering we are setting up property settings, when we click on the Specify option right here that you're seeing, that means that the settings we're about to set are only related to this specific property we're looking at. In this particular case, our vendor will be Mortgages LLC, and we are charging 10% of rent as well as 10% on the garage fee. Within this particular tab, for the users watching, anytime that you need to record an X percentage of management fees on any income or any revenue account that you're charging on the lease ledger, here's where you add that. So if you charge 10% of parking, 10% of pet fees, so on and so forth, you want to ensure that this is added here so that the software can start calculating this for you moving forward. If you scroll down just a smidge more, you're going to notice where it says payout accounts. In this particular case, we're not going to set any. However, if you have the property manager, you retain application fees, late fees, or any other additional fees that you keep, again, as the property manager, and it's not going to the owner as income, you want to assure that we account for those accounts here. But once this is all set, we can go ahead and get rid of this. Again, we'll double check it quickly, 10% for rent, and then 10% for the garage rent. In this case, we are set, and we can go ahead and click Save. Perfect. So now the management fees are set to run based off the charges that we have created in our lease ledger. So it should be calculating the 10% of rent and the 10% of the garage rent. To do so, you would click Create New in the upper left-hand corner, and then you would click where it says Management Fees. Within this report, we're going to run it for this month, and you will notice that the 1000 Biscayne Boulevard has a fee set to be paid of $200, which is spot on. It'd be the 10% of the $1,500 at $150, and then 10% of that $500 garage fee at $50. So what we would do is click this little box on the left-hand side, and then click where it says Create Bills on the bottom right. Within this pop-up here, you have two options. You can either wait to pay the bill just by simply viewing it if needed, or two, we can pay for this up front right now. Considering we do want to record our management fees for the month, we would go ahead and click Pay Bills. This is going to open up a new tab, and it immediately will specify and get you to the next step of showing you which property's bill we're about to pay, as well as the amount that's due. In this particular case, you'll notice that the balance due is $200, and the payment amount is $200. Now, we're going to go ahead and click Next. And we should be matching the date to the date that you actually are billing these management fees. In this particular case, we're going to leave it for today, as we are billing it for today. And the payment method in this case, we'll use EFT. Once we do this, we can hit Finish. And you'll see that the success will pop up as shown, and this has been completed. So if we were to go back to our cash flow report, you will notice now we still have the same income lines. However, now we have the management fees of $200 also showing on this report. So now the available balance at the end should only show those $1,800. At this point, we have no other expenses to record for the month. So the next step that we would do is the distribution. Typically, the distribution is whatever is left as remaining as income to the owner. So what you would like to do at this point is record the distribution itself. To do so, if you click Create New in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to have the option that says Owner Distribution right over here. Here, we're going to be able to specify some of our properties. In this case, we're only going to look at the Biscayne property. On this specific property, it will show you that there's owners assigned as well as the opening balance set, as you're not able to do distributions through the software if there is no owner assigned to the property. So you want to make sure that you go ahead and do that as well. Once we have that set, we'll click where it says Next. And on this page, you're going to notice the full breakdown of the activity for this property. So it's showing us that there's a full balance of $34.50. 2,000 of those are undeposited, as we left that little toggle off on one of our payments. And then the difference between all of that would be $14.50. You don't see the expenses on here. You would only see the cash on hand after everything is said and done. You'll notice to the far right, it is based off percentages. So you see that owner 1 is at 100%. As an example, if there were 2 owners here at 50%, you would see 2 lines, owner 1 and owner 2, at 50%, with the distribution amounts being equally split between the 2. In this case, we have the 1 owner at 100%, so we're going to fully pay out the $14.50 to them. We're going to go ahead and click Next. Within this report, you're going to notice that you have a little drop-down option here as well. Here we can choose the payment method, and again, strongly suggesting that we mimic exactly how it was handled outside of the software. So, let's say that you Zelled your owner for this particular month. We would change this to EFT, and then we would hit Finish. This successful window will pop up, and it takes you back to your overview page. However, we can go back to Reports now on the left-hand side, click where it says Cash Flow Statement. We're going to filter for our property here. And if you notice, again, none of the information is changing. It's just showing you the activity for the month. However, we are now at a $0 balance within the property. So we have successfully recorded the payments received by the tenant for both rent and garage, as well as charging our 10% fees on both of those charges, and recording the repairs that we had to pay to Home Depot for this particular month, while finally paying our owner the $14.50. So for these 30 days, or for this cycle we can call it, this property is now clear, and you can move on to repeat the same process within your other properties if needed. Alrighty, that concludes today's webinar. I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions. Please feel free to leave anything in the chat, and I'll be happy to address them here for you.